Benchmarks and lessons from SAP's User Group and how SAP is improving its workforce. Those are just two of the topics we're going to cover here in episode number 12 of the Journey to S4HANA podcast.
Welcome to Journey to S4HANA, the podcast that covers everything related to SAP implementations. This podcast is not affiliated with SAP and covers the realistic truth behind S4HANA, Ariba, and SuccessFactors ERP implementation success. Whether you're new to the world of SAP, an existing ECC, or R3 customer, a multinational team, or a mid-sized organization, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello, welcome to the Journey to S4HANA podcast, the podcast that covers everything related to S4HANA implementations, including the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything you need to know to be successful in your S4HANA implementations. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm your host for today. I'm also the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. And Third Stage is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world, not only with their S4HANA implementations, but also their non-SAP initiatives as well. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Darian. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you and glad to have the audience here today. We've got a great show planned for you today. Really interesting guest. Geoff Smith is the president of the SAP Users Group in the Americas called ASUG. And he's going to be on the show talking about some lessons from customers, what's going on in the SAP customer community, what are their concerns, what's on their mind, and also what are some of the benchmarks and metrics around SAP adoption and just the concerns and things that are being addressed as part of S4HANA implementations. So a lot to cover there with Geoff. We're also going to get into some newsworthy topics, including how SAP is improving its workforce. And before we get to our guest and our newsworthy topic, though, we like to pull questions from social media that are relevant here today. And you've done that here for questions we've received here over the last week, Darian. So what have you got in store for us?
Okay, so this first question is kind of interesting. I had a client once who cultivated their SaaS ERP with SAP. 5 years later, after co-innovation, SAP failed to deliver what they promised and they had to scrap the project. Larger scale clients have years worth of customized backed into their ERP, which has molded their business processes. SAP can't accommodate that level of customization that will fit with clients' multiple business units, let alone the industry. So what are your thoughts on that, Eric?
Well, my thoughts are that I can relate because we have a client that had the exact same thing happen to them. In fact, so much so that I wonder if this person is from that client. And I can't mention the client's name, but if you go back to episode number 6 of this podcast, we had Mitch Otteson on the show, and he's a director at Third Stage Consulting. And he was the one that led the team that was doing the work for this client of ours who had to cancel their S4HANA implementation. They too were doing co-innovation. They promised that, hey, we'll develop all these capabilities that are specific to your industry. We'll split the cost, and then we'll make it part of our core functionality going forward. But as this person mentioned, same thing. They had a bunch of customization. It's stuff that they couldn't customize or get S4HANA to do, for better or for worse, or whether it was right or wrong is a whole nother story. But that caused them to say, hey, we've got to pull the plug on this whole thing and sort of do a reset on the project. And I think it's worth noting this, that it doesn't happen to every customer, obviously. Some customers are successful in their implementations, but a lot of these legacy SAP customers underestimate how complex or how difficult migrating S4HANA is going to be. Going from a highly customized ECC or R3 environment to S4HANA is a huge jump. And I do have to say that there's times where SAP in the ecosystem community, all the partners and resellers and system integrators in the SAP community, I think there's a level of arrogance there where they think that, hey, we're SAP, we've got the product that has best practices. And if you can't figure out how to make it work for your business, we're not the problem. You're the problem because you don't want to change. And I think it's highly arrogant, unethical, whatever you want to call it. I have a lot of other words I could describe that with, at least as far as what my opinion is. But I think you just have to recognize that that's the way the ecosystem works. I'm not saying just give up because that's the way it works, but you just have to be aware of that risk because it's a real one. And that's why you really want to understand, if you have highly customized legacy environments, you've really got to untangle it and figure out, what are we going to do? Like, are we in a position where maybe we customize some stuff that we didn't need to? And that's usually the case for a lot of companies, is like, yeah, we customize all this stuff over here. We didn't really need to do that. We overcomplicated, over-engineered things we didn't need to. But there are, for most organizations, there's some stuff that you had a really good reason to customize the software, and it's probably something that was unique to you or helped you have a competitive advantage, and something that, quite frankly, you wouldn't expect to find in an off-the-shelf system, especially a SaaS, public cloud sort of thing with SAP. So in those cases, you might find that, hey, maybe SAP is not the right answer in that area. Maybe we need a bolt on a third-party system to handle that need. Maybe we, God forbid, write a custom code or custom program to address that, or custom app. That's okay. That's not the end of the world. You can always integrate it back to SAP too. So you got to think about it in terms of all the risks and what your options are, and make sure you have a clear plan going into it. It's when you go in without fully understanding that, and then you get yourself into trouble halfway through the project. By then you've wasted a ton of money and time, and usually people are getting fired and heads are starting to roll at that point. So you don't want to go down that path. You want to figure that stuff all out up front if you can.
Yeah, that's definitely some good points there. Definitely things that people need to, or companies need to consider when going through a transformation, for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Our second question today is about operating costs. So operating costs, they say, can mean layoffs. How does the talent shortage for IT come into play with that for AI to take over?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, operating cost reductions oftentimes can be interpreted as layoffs. We haven't seen it on a large scale yet where AI has resulted in job loss, but in the tech space we have, a lot of software vendors, including SAP, have had some layoffs in their organizations. A lot of tech vendors have had layoffs that they attribute to AI, and technology and coding and development, in particular, software development, is one area that I think is ripe for layoffs, to where AI can do more of that work for us. I think actually it's going to be a lot of the developing countries that do a lot of the low cost type of work within the world of development. I think those are the ones that are probably going to be impacted the most by AI, just because that's the kind of stuff that can be, it's more likely to be automated or replaced by AI. So I don't know. I don't know, though, that the average manufacturer, for example, is going to have big layoffs because they introduced AI, at least not anytime soon. Maybe in the future. I don't know. I think what's more likely to happen is people are just going to get better at their jobs. They're going to do a better job. They're going to be more accurate, more effective. It may mean that over time, as you scale up as an organization, you don't need to hire as many people because now you've got these tools that make you more efficient. But I don't know. I don't yet see any signs that there's going to be mass layoffs as a result of AI.
Right. That's an interesting transition kind of into our newsworthy topic of the day, which is SAP focusing on improving their workforce with kind of shifting that, using what you said, AI can help improve the workforce. So how is SAP maybe using that to help grow their current workforce's knowledge in that space? So that is what our article talks about today. So what the article specifically says is SAP announced their initiative of committing to enhancing the skills of workforce in response to the global increased demand for cloud and IT competencies, aiming to ensure that professionals and organizations are well prepared for future challenges. Some of these things include guided premium learning and updated certifications via SAP Learning Hub, emphasis on essential skills for cloud solutions, anticipating a 23% growth in IT demand by 2031, anytime, anywhere learning to future-proof careers and prioritize competencies over traditional credentials, and some other things that they listed. But overall, what are the industry effects of having a shortage in skilled IT professionals? I know you have a YouTube video about this, if anybody wants more information about this, but if you could just give us some information of that right now.
Yeah. So I think this is maybe the most relevant to people that are just starting out in consulting. Perhaps they're just out of university, or perhaps they're doing a career change mid-career. They want to get into consulting. In those cases, upskilling quickly is going to be important. And because there's a tech shortage, and it's widely stated that there's not enough technologists out there to fill some of these roles, a lot of organizations that are looking to fill these roles are having to create new people, basically train people that maybe weren't planning to get into the world of SAP, but they need to get them up to speed quickly. So I think SAP's got a solid strategy here to say, hey, we're going to take some of these people that don't yet have the skills and competencies they need, but we're going to give it to them. We're going to help them develop quickly. to get there. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's smart because if you just rely on the existing SAP community, I think we're going to experience bottlenecks for years to come as more legacy SAP customers scramble to get live and get live on S/4HANA and off their legacy system by the 2027 deadline. I think that problem is just going to become pronounced over the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. And for somebody that is starting out, like you mentioned, would you recommend them taking courses such as the one mentioned, like from Learning Hub, to begin the career in consulting?
I do. I mean, that certainly gives you a solid technology background in terms of understanding the architecture of HANA and how S/4HANA works and, just how to use the tool set in the SAP world. That's all important stuff. But I think what's even more important is all the non-technical stuff. And I don't know, just based on from back in the day, back in the early days of my career when I was at Price Waterhouse, I got trained in SAP. And I remember it was extremely technical. It was very focused on the product, how the product works, how you configure it, how you integrate it, all that stuff. And again, it was good to have that background, but I don't think that's what makes me good at SAP consulting. It's not my knowledge of SAP. It's my knowledge of how to connect the dots between business, people, and technology. And I think that's what oftentimes gets overlooked. So if I'm a new consultant, I'm trying to figure out how do I address that triangulation of people, process, technology. How can I be at least good enough in all those areas? Maybe I'm particularly strong in one of them, but I need to understand all three of those areas to be successful.
Yeah, definitely. Those soft skills are definitely something that maybe can be overlooked by some people, but they're definitely a really important part of this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Speaking of the industry and where we're headed, I'm excited for our guest today. We're going to have Geoff Smith, who is the CEO of the ASUG, which is the America's SAP User Group. And he's going to be on the show talking about some lessons from customers and benchmarks from customers and basically what's going on in the world of SAP from a customer perspective. So we're going to get his sort of consolidated viewpoints on that. So we're excited to have him on the show. But first, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Journey to S/4HANA podcast. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Eric Kimberly, and I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting Group. And I wanted to take a moment and tell you a little bit about Third Stage and what we do and how we help clients through their S/4HANA implementations. First of all, Third Stage is technology agnostic, meaning that we're not affiliated with SAP. However, we do have quite a bit of experience helping clients through their S/4HANA implementations. We help clients evaluate and do a fit gap analysis of S/4HANA. We help them find the right system integrator. We help them negotiate their contracts with SAP and their system integrator. And then we also help with implementation planning and the implementation itself. So we help mobilize the right resources, make sure you've got a solid and realistic program to manage overall S/4HANA implementation. And then we'll help with the program management, the change management, as well as process improvement. We also provide some technical services around data migration, as well as architecture and system integration as well. So those are just some of the things we can do to help you through your transformation. And if you're looking for more information about it, or if you'd like to learn more, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to just bounce around ideas or be an informal sounding board for you as you begin your transformation. You can reach me by contacting me via the contact information in the links below in the description field for this podcast. So look forward to chatting with you, and we'll see you soon.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to episode number 12 of the Journey to S/4HANA podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling, your host for today. This is the podcast that has everything to do with S/4HANA implementations. It's produced by Major Tom Productions, sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients with their S/4HANA implementations and their non-SAP implementations as well. You can find all the current and past episodes of this show by going to journeytosforhana.com. So excited for our next guest who I'm about to bring on the show. His name's Geoff Smith. He's the president of the user group in the Americas called ASUG, and he's going to be on the show talking about some benchmarks and lessons from customers within ASUG. So without all that being said, Geoff, welcome to the show.
Eric, wonderful to have be in with you today. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, glad to have you. First time you and I have met and chatted, so this is an exciting conversation for me, and excited to get some unique perspectives from you, especially because you come from the world of being an SAP user and someone who had implemented SAP in your previous life, and now you're leading the user group within the Americas. So I appreciate having you on here today. Maybe before we jump in and get to some of the questions I have, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, thank you. And I was going to say, I've known you and your name for some time, so I'm excited to finally be able to be on with you and spend some time talking about the subject that both you and I enjoy talking about, which is SAP. So by introduction, for the last 10 years, I've been the CEO of the North America user community, ASUG. I really call myself the Chief Community Officer. A CEO sounds like a really official title. And my job is really to help, and why we do what we do is to help the customer base get the most value out of this amazing investment they make in SAP. Prior to that, I was a chief information officer, first going backwards in time chronologically, a CIO at Tom's Shoes Fashion out in Los Angeles, where we went from a homegrown ERP to SAP Fashion. That was interesting. I got to understand what seasonality means and colors mean, because prior to that, I was in the food business, where I had responsibility for 8 years for moving from PeopleSoft onto SAP as we made this huge organization that became the third largest chicken, beef, poultry, which is chicken, beef, pork, poultry, lamb business in the world. Took that to SAP, and that was the first time I really got into the SAP environment. And then prior to that, almost 10 years at Ford Motor Company, doing global human resources and global customer service and all the systems that go into manufacturing. So a lot of my background is manufacturing based. And then back in the day when I went to college, but before there was electricity, I was an accountant and spent my time thinking about accounting. And that was what I started with. I always felt that accounting would be a really good way. If you understood accounting, you understand how business worked and you could figure out everything else. I never had any idea I was going to get into tech. And so I kind of started in public accounting and kind of said, this accounting thing isn't as exciting as I thought it was, and wandered into technology, doing systems implementations, and then kind of wandered from there. So, but the last 10 years have been truly phenomenal being part of ASUG and helping customers. I mean, our customers make these massive investments in this thing called ERP or HR or supply chain, however you want to think about it. And they make these massive investments, and these are investments that define careers, they define organizations. SAP is a tremendous organization, and I think the world of them. And I also think the world of everyone who's around this ecosystem, because it's not just about buying SAP. For most of us, we buy into a career. So whether we're, part of the customer base buying SAP software, or we're part of the partner community, thinking about how do we make implementations work and how do we add value-added services. We're part of SAP. At the end of the day, we're all people, and we're all trying to make this thing called SAP work for our organizations. And I think that's what makes this really cool. And ASUG is SAP's largest user community. We're a little bit bigger than the folks over in Germany, DSAG, great friends of mine. But 38 chapters across North America. We co-sponsor Sapphire and ASUG annual conference with SAP here in North America. TechEd has now turned into ASUG Tech Connect, so we do the TechEd brand here as well. Our job is just to help people learn, connect, and grow.
Right. That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. It's an interesting journey from finance to CIO and now to leading the ASUG group. When you think of your years at JBS and at Tom's, the two companies you were CIO at previous to ASUG, you were involved with implementing SAP at both locations? Is that right? At both,
correct?
At Tom's and JBS.
Yeah.
So what were some of the the headline takeaways? I'm sure you have a million lessons from those years of doing those implementations, but what were some of the biggest takeaways during your experience there?
And what was interesting about both of them is two radically different industries, right? One being food and manufacturing, right? And so I always think about the beef industry as being a disassembly business versus cars, which is assembly, or even footwear and fashion, right? So one was about food, the other one was about fashion. Also two radically different businesses in size. At the time, Tom's was about a $500 million a year business, and JBS, when I left, was almost approaching 30 billion. So very different in how they approached the world, right? But one thing was clear. They needed SAP to work every day and be consistent every day, because if it wasn't, they couldn't ship, they couldn't invoice, they couldn't do general ledger, they couldn't close their books. So this little piece of software, and it's not little, right, was really at the epicenter of how these businesses operated. And that became really important. So when we were at JBS, when I was at JBS, if we had SAP go down, you could wait about 4 hours and the whole business would stop operating. We couldn't ship product, right? And if you can't ship product, and product's coming in the way beef works, it comes off of the fabrication lines, right? It gets cut down, put into boxes, and gets stored in massive cold warehouses. Well, if SAP goes down, they can't get it off the floor because they can't put it away, because you can't take beef you can't put it away if you can't find it. Right. So you have to make sure that everything's barcode driven. So, and many of the people who are probably listening today who are involved in supply chain and understand warehousing, you don't just randomly put stuff anywhere. You need to know where it is, where you can find it. Right. So if we can't put it away, then we can't create it. So the whole production line backs up and stops. With Tom's, right, you get the same thing, a little bit less mission critical, but certain times a year when you're doing ordering, when the big retailers are saying, I want this many shoes, if you can't process those orders, you can't allocate, then your whole business collapses again. And you look at every single SAP customer, and there's something about their SAP implementation that is mission critical to them. And the other thing I think that's interesting about all the CIOs and the IT organizations involved in SAP or Oracle or Workday or these big massive enterprise systems, is they can either be career builders or they can be career breakers, right? So when we took SAP live when I was at Tom's, and I'm going back 12 years, we did a lot of work. We did a lot of practice. We made sure everything worked. And even that night, that Friday night, we all have these stories. That Friday night we say, we're going live, and you're sitting in the final cutover meeting, and you're sitting in that room and you're like, oh God, is this really going to work? And I remember that Friday night, stepping into the men's room because I was nauseous, because I was just that concerned that what I thought we were going to do wasn't going to work. And it's like getting ready for a big game day. You and I, as we warmed up today, talked about football, right? That feeling you get in your stomach, I think I'm prepared. I think I know what we're doing.
But I don't really know till I hit the field.
I don't really know, right? And so are we going to ship product on Monday? I don't know.
We'll find out.
We'll find out, right? And I think those are some of the, and that hasn't changed. We talked today about S4. We talked about next generation, cloud, SaaS, clean core, low customization. Those tenets are still very much present in all of these conversations that we're having. And if anything, because, I came of age in the era of on-prem data centers. I remember back in my Ford days, of playing all the games at Ford Motor Company about how do you get servers racked into a data center. Well, now that's been solved by cloud, right? It's like I would have to give up my newborn to get a server put into a Ford data center, right? And even when you had all the funding in place, you went up to the data center manager, said, I got my funding. You can buy this server for me. They go, nope, not buying your server. Why? Why can't you buy my server? Well, we have a server cap this quarter. We're only putting in so many, and you didn't make the cut. But I have money.
Right.
You can buy. Nope, not buying it. We have another KPI. You're not going to make it. I got to run customer service. Anyway,
Not our problem.
Not our problem. Anyway, but coming back to it, these are timeless stories. They change, and I do actually think in today's world, when you talk about S4, it is slightly more complicated because we've pulled this out a little bit more, right? You have cloud people, you have cloud providers helping you run servers. Yeah, you can spin them up and down faster, but you actually don't have a responsibility for them. Pros and cons. Right, I don't happen to believe today in on-prem. I believe that we're probably better serviced as IT professionals in the cloud. But it's a different. Some of these stories are the same, but it's slightly different. It's slightly more complex.
All right. Well, hold that thought if you don't mind, Geoff. We're going to take a quick break. I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to S/4HANA podcast. If you're going through an S/4HANA implementation, you're looking for best practices and tips on how to make your project more successful, I encourage you to check out 2 resources that I made available to our listeners here on this podcast. First is our guide to a successful S/4HANA implementation. It's a paper that I wrote based on all of our clients that have implemented S/4HANA, some of the lessons we've learned, some of the best practices that we typically advise our clients to follow when going through their S/4HANA implementation. So be sure to check that out. You can find that in the links below in this podcast. You can also scan the QR code right in front of you. The second thing you might want to check out is an online course that I've created. It's a course that's called the Deep Dive into SAP S/4HANA Implementations. And in that 2.5-hour course, I get into all the basics of what SAP S/4HANA is, what it takes to make the project more successful, how to manage change, how to handle the project planning, how to manage your system integrator, as well as some case studies from some of our clients and some of the lessons learned from some of our clients. So check out that training as well. So there's two things you could check out here, both in the links below. One is the guide to S4HANA implementations. The other is my S4HANA training course. So be sure to check it out. And our goal here is to help you be more successful in your transformation. So hope you found this information useful, and we'll continue on with the show.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Welcome back to episode number 12 of the Journey to S4HANA podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients with their S4HANA implementations. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to journeyto4hana.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So I'm here with Geoff Smith, who's the CEO of ASUG, which is the America's SAP User Group. We're chatting about benchmarks and lessons from customers within the SAP community, and having a great conversation here so far. So how did you make that transition then from being a CIO that's implementing SAP at these two companies to now leading the ASUG organization?
Great question.
What led to that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I was the CIO of a $30 billion company and we were running, SAP was one of the big things we ran, I had the privilege and joy of having SAP account executives who really cared about what we did, right? Because we were big enough and we were spending enough money that they had dedicated teams helping us. And that was really cool. When I stepped down to Tom's, which was $500 million, we didn't have dedicated account executives anymore. So we were always, from the very get-go, when we stepped into SAP, we were always, and I always felt that ASUG was an incredibly important part of our organization. We were very actively involved in ASUG in your neck of the woods in Denver, right? We would show up for the meetings. We were part of the community. We wanted to be known as a place that was running SAP, and we wanted to make sure that the community knew we were out there. Great for recruiting, great for talking about what we were doing, and we wanted to have a stake in it. And then I moved into Los Angeles, and I realized I need ASUG more than ever. Instead of me giving, I need to take. Because now I have to, understand, in a very different world. So I have to have the scale of being a much smaller company that isn't on SAP's radar. We were on SAP's radar because we were a cool brand, but I still had a lot of work to get done. And then I was asked to step onto the board of ASUG, and I stepped in, and we did a leadership transition. And fairly quickly after I joined, and they said, "Hey, would you consider being the CEO of ASUG?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I'm a CIO. I'm not interested." And they said, "No, we're serious." I said, "Me too. I don't want to be the CEO." And then they did a better job of selling me on it, because eventually I said yes. And I joined.
They wore you down, huh?
They wore me down. And I joined as the CEO, and it was a good thing. I sat there one night, in my backyard in Los Angeles. I said, you know what? Why wouldn't I want to be the CEO? Run an organization instead of leading IT. It's important, but this would be really fun. And it's 10 years later. It's been a blast.
Yeah, sounds like fun. It'd be cool.
Yeah.
And you you get to scale or leverage your impact on organizations that are using SAP throughout the entire continent, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and as a CIO, I always had the chance of thinking to myself, well, marketing, they don't really know how to use this software, and they don't know what they're doing, and finance, we can help them run better financial systems, and they don't really know what they're doing. And now, guess what? I get to own all of it, and now I get to sit there and figure out how to make it all work. And it's not quite as simple as it sounds.
Right. Well, speaking of stuff that's not as simple as it sounds, what are your thoughts or your observations around this 2027 deadline? So SAP legacy customers on ECC and R3 making that transition to S/4HANA by 2027. What are you hearing from your members? Sort of what are you seeing? What are your general observations and sort of that state of the union of what you're seeing among your member base?
Well, I worry when you say State of the Union because I worry about fruit being flung at me from the far reaches of the audience, right?
Right.
So
I can't reach you from here. So
yeah, I know. Thank God we're virtual, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm behind glass in a studio. I can.
Right.
First question typically comes up is hey, is SAP serious about this 2027 date? It's going to move, isn't it? And no, I don't think it's going to move. So the first piece of advice to give to customers is it's coming. It's not going to move. And, nor is ASUG going to ask for it to move because a lot of customers have moved. And so I think for SAP, if all of a sudden they go, oh, sorry, blink, we're kidding, it's a crushing credibility problem. So 2027 to 2030 is real. Now, there's different ways to approach that. Every customer is slightly different. How you want to do it might be slightly different, but don't think that the date's all of a sudden going to slip because it's not. We know that 47%, we have a tremendously wonderful research department here at ASUG. They do every year, we do pulse of the customer surveys. We do a lot of research. We know a couple things. 47% of the membership base are already live or in the process of moving. That's an impressive statistic. But that also means on the flip side, 53% are still not quite there. That's the group I'm worried about. 41% are planning moves. So we know that I'm not, when I'm out in the community, I'm not hearing massive resistance to this. Now, what is I think concerning the customer base is how do I do this? How do I make it more efficient? This is going to cost a lot of money. How do I get a business case done? And as they said, we have lots of resources for members for that. So we're happy to help you with all those things. We see a relatively small number that are either on plan, are not sure yet what to do, or they put their plans on hold. About 12% have their plans on hold at the moment, and that seems reasonable to me. Organizations could go through different type of M&A transactions, and things might be happening in their organization. So I understand that. But the good news is I think we're seeing this migration. And so, for the SI community, I think that this is a great opportunity. I do worry about compression, meaning that if organizations wait until the very last minute, some of the talent that they need to get this done may not be available, or you may not have the best talent. So my advice to the entire membership base and customer base of SAP is take it seriously and start executing your plans now, because this is only going to get tighter. And I want to make sure that everyone has a successful implementation.
Yeah, and the last thing you want is to be in a situation where you can't get the talent you need, both externally from your SI and or your internal resources you're going to need to support the project. And I worry about that too. And it's not just SAP, by the way. It's other, Microsoft Dynamics and other vendors are sort of doing the same thing, and customers are waiting, and you're going to see this mass amount or a massive burst of activity on the digital transformation / ERP implementation front all at once across different technology ecosystems. So it's a little scary to think about. So I agree with you. Getting a head start can only help.
Right. And it comes down to supply and demand curves, right? If there's more demand than there is supply, two really awkward things happen if you're in technology. One, your price goes up, makes sense. Mm-hmm. Or two, the quality of the resource you're working with goes down. And, that's one of the things that I'm concerned about is that these implementations, when you're talking about S4, they require a good deal of skill. And if you don't have the right skilled individuals working with you, you could be in trouble. And I'd like to see customers make really good, smart, sound decisions, and not be making decisions because they're out of time, they're out of budget, and they're out of skill. I mean, to me, that's the worst of all things. And as you and I talked about, when you make or break careers, I don't want people to go live only to find out a few days later that the whole wheels have fallen off the proverbial boat, right? Wheels don't fall off a boat. I'm sorry, Eric. Wheels fall off a car.
I know what you mean.
Or a bus.
The sails fall off the boat.
Yeah, the sails fall off the train. So
whatever. I know what you mean. I'm terrible at cliches, so I'm
awful
the wrong
cliches.
Yeah,
this is it's a Wednesday. These are bad cliche days. So,
right.
So that's what I worry about. Right? Is we need to make sure that these implementations carry forward and organizations are satisfied and happy and see value in them. If we're going to wait to the last minute, that is going to be very tricky to do.
Yeah. And, one thing I've heard you talk about on other podcasts, in particular, John Reed's podcast. And John Reed, for those that don't know, he's a big thought leader in the SAP space. He's been covering it for decades now. He's a very entertaining guy. I highly recommend his podcast. But I've heard you on his podcast in particular talking about innovation and AI and some of the investments that SAP is making in S/4HANA. When you look at the innovation strategy of SAP, whether it's related to AI and or anything else, what are you most excited about, and what are your members most excited about from what you're seeing so far?
So the first thing I think about when you use the word innovation is I think innovation is in the eye of the beholder, not the eye of the giver, right? So every organization needs to think about innovation through their lens and how do they want to innovate their organizations. And that can be multidimensional. How do you want to innovate your product? How do you want to innovate your teams? How do you want to innovate your organization? How do you want to do all these things? So I would say don't wait for the software vendor or the software partner to tell you how to innovate. How do you want to innovate? So what is your innovation opportunity, right? How do you want to think about it? And then go in search of the tools and the solutions that help you get down that road. That to me is my first thing. I do foundationally believe a couple things. Generative AI has changed the landscape. And in order for us as technology practitioners to get the most advantage of generative AI, if we want to be if you think about an innovation curve, like a bell curve, if we want to be to the middle to the right of that curve, that's going to necessitate three essential elements. The first one, we need to be probably in the cloud, right? Cloud-based architectures, cloud-based solutions are going to be essential to be in that innovation curve because you can turn things up and down much more quickly. Number two, we need to think about software as a service, right? And software as a thing that we can implement and configure very quickly, right? So we have to think about software as a service. And I think S4 is that beginning of starting to move to SAP being perceived as a SaaS solution, software as a service. And we can get into, you and I could spend the next 3 hours arguing public cloud, private cloud, probably outside of the scope today. And no one has patience for that. We want to make this entertaining. And then the third one, the third one is you have to sort of be very careful about how you customize, right? And so the more customizations you make, the less likely you're going to be able to innovate, right? Because those customizations have to be maintained. They have to have constant care and feeding. They take you off the well-worn beaten path. So those are the three, to me, those are the three things. If organizations want to be further to the right of the innovation curve, they want to be leading the charge, then you need to be almost no customization, obviously SaaS, and obviously cloud. If you want to be to the far left, means that you actually, don't want any of that, then by all means, be on-prem, right? Write your own software and customize everything you possibly can because you're not going to be able to innovate at speed. The problem is your competitors will, and your competitors could potentially outperform you because they're looking at those things. That's the way I think about it. So I'm excited.
Bogged down by
I'm S4 to me is a tremendous opportunity. And this isn't easy, right? Unwinding customizations is not a cavalier thing. It has to be thought through very carefully. Why did we make that customization? What are the business ramifications? Can the business handle out-of-the-box features and functionality? How much energy and effort do I need to get to convince my head of finance, my head of supply chain, my head of sales to take software as delivered versus, nope, we're special, we're different, everything we do is super unique, make it work the way we want it to work? Hard, especially if you want to take advantage of some of these future innovations.
All right. Well, hold that thought if you don't mind, Geoff. We're going to take a quick break. I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to S/4HANA podcast. people oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Welcome back to episode number 12 of the Journey to S4HANA podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients with their S4HANA implementations. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to journeyto s4hana.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So I'm here with Geoff Smith, who's the CEO of ASUG, which is the America's SAP User Group. We're chatting about benchmarks and lessons from customers within the SAP community. And having a great conversation here so far. You mentioned generative AI, and SAP has the Joule tool, the AI tool. How are customers responding to generative AI and Joule in general? It seems to me, let me test a hypothesis with you. It seems to me that a lot of organizations are enamored by it and fascinated by it, but not quite sure how to use it to innovate. To your point, how they could use AI or Joule in particular to innovate their businesses. How are your members, are you seeing that, or how are your members responding to Joule and AI in general within SAP?
Wonderful question. If you asked me this a year ago, I would have given you a very perplexed answer, which is they don't seem to be reacting at all. And if you look at our research from a year ago, generative AI was not on the was low on the importance factor, right? And you know, I was watching it and I was saying, that's interesting. A year now, it's at the top of the list. And I think it's a little bit of hype and it's a little bit of reality. And it's also a lot of pressure coming from people. So boards, CEOs, leadership teams are all saying, oh my God, this has to be the answer. We have to be able to do this, right? And I think that's driving it. Secondly, AI and generative AI is probably the worst it's ever going to be right now. Right. So it is innovating itself and it's getting better at an exponential rate. And while today we may not know exactly how to use these things or how to make them fit or what they're going to do, and I guarantee you in a year or 2 years from now, that's going to be clear. And if you're not ready for it, you're even further behind. And that concerns me. So like as an example, I have the Microsoft Copilot tools on my Microsoft subscription. The team has been very gracious and given it to me after a whole lot of harping and complaining from me. And why isn't this working? And I'm on a Mac platform, and some of my IT team is in the room with me today, and they're kind of giving me that wincing look of pain, right? Yeah, right. He was really after us for this. But now that I have it, I'm not exactly sure what to do with it. right? It's interesting. It's different, but it's not in my daily workflow, and it's going to take me a little bit of time to get it in there. And I think the same thing's true with Joule. It's not in my daily workflow either, but it'll get there. I know how to use ChatGPT. I mean, to me, the most foundational change, we've had some internal conversations about this, and we've started to rank order even the AI tools we use inside of ASUG. And the one that is actually the most interesting is the most innocuous of them all, Grammarly. Right. And I've been noticing during, we're in the middle of March Madness, right? And they've started to advertise, and I've seen something interesting I haven't done before. Right. But what's interesting about Grammarly is they've actually figured out how to embed it into your workflow. So for me, Grammarly pops up with little red squigglies all over the place. And it's demonstrated to me every single day that I have no idea how to write the English language. It's really depressing. Right. It's really depressing. Like I literally cannot write a sentence without having red squigglies or blue squigglies. But it's in my workflow, right? And it's actually, I think, made me a better writer. And that's the interesting about it is it's embedded in. The co-pilots and the Joules are not embedded in yet. As they start to make that leap, it'll be very interesting how they work. I also find it's interesting in Grammarly is Grammarly also has no idea whether I'm writing an email to a friend or I'm writing an email to my board of directors. They're very different. So I get the red squigglies regardless of what I'm writing. The problem is I have a Pavlovian response to it, which is every time I see a red squiggly, I now must solve for it. So I have the most wonderfully correct grammatical emails to my friends that have taken me twice as long to write than they should have. Instead of me saying, I'll be at the bar at 7 p.m. on Friday. It's like, no, I'm going to write this into a paragraph. And they're like, can you just tell me what time you're going to be at the bar? Right. But with my board, I do want to be a little bit more precise. And so it doesn't understand those delineations. So while I appreciate that everything's consistent, we wrote a 7-year vision for ASUG a few months ago. And it was interesting. And Grammarly was all over it. We wrote it with a very specific style. Grammarly hated it. It hated the style. It wanted to move us back to the mean, right? This is how people write. Right? No, we don't want to write that way. And it was like a constant battle with it. Whole paragraphs were in blue, right? And it's like, no, we like that paragraph. And you right-click on it and say, I've got a better version of this for you. You'd right-click on it. That's no better, right? Yeah, it's different. It's different, but it doesn't say anything better. And so that's why I find it's interesting about these AI models. But again, worst it's ever going to be.
Yeah. And I think back to your point about defining what innovation means to you before you get too excited about Joule or ChatGPT or any other. I don't know why I call it Julie. I think it's because I want it to be a female AI. It just seems more trustworthy for some reason. But
good point.
Kidding aside, it seems like you've got to define, in your blueprinting phase, how are you going to use Joule? How are you going to use AI potentially to innovate your business? And it's really up to you because a tool can do a lot of different things, and AI it's going to, like you're saying, it's going to have a lot of potential in the future, but it's up to you to sort of carve out that roadmap for how are you going to use that and other innovations that SAP might be investing in.
Where I think we can do a tremendous amount of good right now, where there's a lot of opportunity, is not necessarily in how these tools are going to impact the end user experience. How can we as technology professionals use them to help automate our implementation of S4? How can we use it to drive up quality? How can we use these tools to help drive testing? How can we use them to help us write end user procedures, process guides? How can we make sure that they're helping us to make sure data quality is at the highest level? How can we even use some of these tools to help when we do have to customize, very small customizations, that they're written with tremendous quality and clarity? I see a lot of opportunity there, and we're not talking about that enough. We want to kind of deliver these end user tools. Here's Joule, and you can ask it these questions, and it'll give you your answer from SAP. And I kind of sort of get it. I would challenge the SAP leadership team, and Philip Herzig is now leading AI for SAP, reporting directly to SAP's CEO, Christian Klein. Philip, how can we use this as technology professionals to accelerate the migration to S4 and help drive up quality, reduce cost, and make that 2027 window more achievable?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of making the 2027 window more achievable, I know two initiatives that SAP has recently launched to help get more customers onto S4HANA. One being Rise, which is designed for the legacy customers that they're trying to move over to SAP or S4HANA Cloud, and then there's also Grow, designed for more of the mid-market to entice more mid-market organizations to move to S4HANA. How are you seeing these two initiatives are you seeing them get traction? How is it affecting the customer base? What's your take on those two initiatives?
The wonderful thing about Rise is it's been around for some time, and ASUG had an active role in Rise at the very beginning when SAP was trying to work through the concept of it. And so we've been around it for some time. We're seeing a huge amount of awareness of Rise. 82% of the customer base is aware of Rise versus 73 from a year prior. So the numbers are moving up fairly strong. Just a quick delineation, Rise is really is the solution for those who are, existing SAP customers, right? Grow is more of a net new offering for mid-market. They kind of both end up at the same point, but they're done slightly differently. So if I'm an existing SAP customer, I'm going to go to Rise first. Rise, to me, if you said in 2 sentences or less, what is Rise? It is the new way to license SAP. Now, there's more to it than that, and probably Dave Robinson, who leads Rise globally for SAP, might call me up and text me with some really nasty words. You didn't say it right, Geoff. But honestly, it's a licensing mechanism. How do I buy a subscription-based access to SAP? Rise is the way to do it. And it's really going to be, for most customers, I think the thing to understand is it is really the go-forward licensing mechanism for SAP. So it's not as if there's lots of other options for you. This is kind of what it's going to be. The whole industry is moving towards subscription-based, OpEx-based licensing. And Rise is SAP's version of that. And Grow is the version of that for mid-market.
Sure. Now, how are customers responding? Is it working, from SAP's perspective or from your user base perspective?
Yeah, I think it's long-term working, but there's some people who have a little gray like me, right? Who are used to the age-old way of implementing, licensing software. You license it perpetually, right? You bought a license, it was good forever, and you paid maintenance, right? So this is a little different. For businesses that love OpEx, this is a wonderful thing because you get, back in the day, you bought licenses, perpetual licenses. If you were an OpEx business, you hated it because you can't capitalize it, right? Now we've kind of flipped 180 degrees. And if you're an OpEx based business, this is amazing. If you're a CapEx business, you're like, I want to buy with cash and buy once, and you can't.
Right.
So depending on how you're coming from that, gets a little bit interesting. Some of our regulated industries out there that deal with rate bases and have to get approvals from rate boards, right? OpEx-based licensing is a new thing for them. Most of them are starting to work through it. It's a different way of thinking than the way that these businesses have historically run. Everyone's adjusting to it. Now, I think it's great because technically you can dial up and dial down. I think where SAP and Workday and Salesforce and Oracle can be better is we seem just to be able to dial it up, and the dial only goes in a clockwise direction. It's not so good when you turn it down the other way. And that's where I think there's a tremendous opportunity. And we as customers need to be better about that. And that is an area where I see all of the tech providers, because obviously they want regular revenue. They want repeatable revenue. Wall Street rewards them for, ever upward sales price and ACVs. And if you really allow customers to dial up and down, that's a little harder to predict. And no one likes to operate in an unpredictable world.
All right. Well, hold that thought if you don't mind, Geoff. We're going to take a quick break. I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to S/4HANA podcast. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Welcome back to episode number 12 of the Journey to S4HANA podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients with their S4HANA implementations. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to journeyto s4hana.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So I'm here with Geoff Smith, who's the CEO of ASUG, which is the America's SAP User Group. We're chatting about benchmarks and lessons from customers within the SAP community. And having a great conversation here so far. So in general, whether it's part of the RISE initiative or GROW, or just in general, when organizations in your member base are moving to S4HANA, what are some of the biggest challenges that they're having with the transition? And are those challenges different than you might have seen in years past?
Yeah, so I think we've talked about this a little bit, Eric. Number one, a very careful thoughtful approach to customization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And understanding the difference between configuration and customization, right? Configuration means I can throw some switches and those switches will survive over time as successive releases of SAP come out, right? I think we as customers need to do as much as we can to move the burden of software to the software vendor. So SAP, I want you to be the provider of my software, not just a framework. If you think about it, in the early days of SAP, what was so wonderful from us as customers, it was a framework, right? We could customize it. We had no idea that these customizations, 20 years, I think about where I was at as a CIO back in the day. I had no idea that the customizations we were writing 20 years ago would come back and haunt me. I didn't have any idea about cloud. I didn't have any idea about SaaS. I mean, these words didn't even exist. If you tell me, hey, you're going to run all your software in a cloud, I'd be like, what are you talking about, right?
Yeah.
And SAP prided itself on having a language that you could write business processes in. Now we've got to take all that and give that back to SAP and say, no, you have to take responsibility for this because I can't innovate at the speed I need to if I'm writing customizations. So to me, we as a customer base have to make sure that transfer happens. Number two, right? We have to decustomize. And that sounds simple, but we all know it's not, right? Our line of business peers, our end users have gotten very comfortable with this is the way we enter an invoice into SAP, or this is the way we do a sales order, or this is the process we do when something goes haywire. And now we're going to pull all that out, right? We're going to say, we're going to redo this. And if you run a multinational business and you are operating multiple divisions, I mean, most SAP customers are complex beasts. If you're not complicated, you don't need SAP, right? So, if you can run on QuickBooks, you should run on QuickBooks. If you can't run on QuickBooks, there's a reason for it. You're complicated. These things get complicated, and you have to figure out a way to get to standard. Not always easy. And then the training and the fighting and the nope, we're new, we're unique. I can't train my people, right? That to me are some of the big challenges, right? How do you really decustomize? It is a gut-wrenching, hard, frustrating change. Once done, it will pay dividends. But the journey to that will be fraught with peril and cliffs and boulders and thorns and all those other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very dramatic imagery there, by the way, but it's true, and it's a cultural change too, which is dangerous and full of thorns and pitfalls and things like that. You're changing the mindset of the organizations, really.
Very much
I mean, it's not even just about customization. It's about you can't necessarily have every single thing you want. And by the way, what you want may not, there may be some baggage attached to why you want something. Just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean you need to continue doing it that way. So it's sort of like the mindset shift for the entire organization that's using S4HANA.
I had a conversation with the CEO a number of months ago, and he was quizzing me on this, and he was trying to understand. And he was not, this is a CEO. He's not a technologist, right? And he's not supposed to be. And he said, tell me, Geoff, why would I do this? And I explained it to him. He kind of got it. I said, but here's the really ugly role you're going to have to play. You're going to have to be the arbiter between IT and line of business professionals who are going to come to you, or if not you, someone that you're going to anoint to be the decision maker here. And IT is going to say, this is a customization, and it's going to cost us X dollars to do it. And the line of business go, okay, spend it. because that's easier for me than making a change. But that doesn't actually fix the problem. I said, so almost
Right.
what you have to think about is a radically different view is that the line of business, if they want that change that badly, hey, guess what? We're going to give you an intercompany chargeback of X thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for that. And we're going to charge it to you every single year, right? Every single year that customization is in existence because you're different, you're going to have to pay for it. Traditionally, a lot of this stuff is just borne by the IT department, right? So there is no downside risk for a line of business to say, yep, I want it different, because they don't pay for it. Change it and start to move some of those costs back, and it might drive different behavior.
Right.
He says so glibly, right?
Right. Right. So is there anything else? You mentioned some stats earlier. You mentioned that 47% of your member base have either completed or started their transition to S/4HANA. The other 53% haven't. Are there any other metrics at a high level that you should shed some insight as to what's going on with the SAP community right now, in terms of research you guys have done?
Well, that's a really big question. What I would recommend is that ASUG members download our Pulse to the Customer survey. I think it's a tremendous tool available on asug.com. And, there's a wide swath of kind of thoughts around training and education. How skilled are we, right? Do we believe that our organizations have the right skills internally? And our survey results are saying we're getting better, but we're not quite there yet. And so I think one of the things to think through, if I'm a CIO today, is my team as skilled as it needs to be in order to be successful at this? And if they aren't, what are the steps that I need to take? Now, what's interesting in that is, what does skills mean? And for many of us, we have outsourced the maintenance of SAP, right? We're using, application maintenance organizations to do the day-to-day care and feeding. We've outsourced customization. We've outsourced many different pieces of this. So our skill set has to be a little different. It has to be awareness of the opportunities and the things that I can do inside of SAP. In addition to then, how do I manage and project manage and hold quality accountability to the people that I am using to do the work for me? Just like most of us today, when we build a house, we don't go out and start banging 2x4s with nails, right? We don't do that. Right. We hire someone to build the frame. We might actually hire a general contractor. Some of us are more daring, like me, or a little bit stupid, right? And I'll hire the electrician, I'll hire the plumber, I'll hire the framer, I'll hire the drywall. And not in the middle of it, this is a mistake. Right. And if you're going to hire those people, you have to be able to trust that they actually know what they're doing, right? That they actually can frame a house, that the electrician actually can pull wire through your house without setting it on fire, right? So, you need to have some of those skills. So your skills as a GC are very different than if you're a plumber. Like I don't know how to plumb, but, I know what a leaky faucet looks like, and I need to hold my plumber accountable to not creating leaky faucets or leaky drains.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It makes total sense. So so we can learn more, get, what do you call it? The pulse of the customer by going to ASUG, the ASUG website. And
ASUG website, and look for the pulse of the customer and look at ways to think about, and it's going to give you lots of information on how customers are looking at S4. How are they thinking about budgeting? Budgeting continues to be a huge issue, right? And this is a problem to me, is that there's two components to an SAP implementation. It's buying the licenses from SAP, and it's buying the tools and equipment and techniques to do the implementation. And it's the second part that is actually the bigger price tag by factors. How do we as a customer community want to narrow that down over time? Which is why I think automation is so important, right? Use of cloud is growing. No surprise there. I mean, I think, we're seeing cloud continue to become more and more of a predominant factor. I think most CIOs are more excited about exiting data centers than growing them. And they recognize that, using cloud, but that creates some interesting other kind of, ancillary issues, lock-in, long-term rating, right? The problem we all have is, just like electricity, the use of data centers continues to escalate. So the cost is only going in one direction, which is up. How do we want to manage that over the long term? We talked about workforce, and we're seeing us return. The survey data shows us that We had some interesting dips and valleys during the pandemic, but we seem to be out of that. No surprise. But it's only, when we think about the pandemic, it's not been that long that we've been out of it, but we're seeing a return to kind of a normality in a post-pandemic world. It's different than pre-pandemic, but we are seeing a normality.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about customers, just to sort of wrap this all up and tie it all together, what about SAP customers that are either on a legacy SAP product, they're thinking about moving to S/4HANA, or it's maybe a net new customer, someone who's not on SAP currently, but they're moving to S/4HANA platform? What sort of closing advice would you leave for those that are in the midst of or starting their S/4HANA journeys?
So if you are a net new customer, you've never thought about SAP before, come on in. First of all, I think ASUG, as one of the things that I think does differentiate SAP from some of its competitors, is they do believe in the customer community. SAP believes that organizations like ASUG, like DSAG, like UKI are incredibly important aspects of letting the customer base have a voice and a say in the software. And I think that is critically important. They don't look at the customers and say, I don't know what you are, stay away. They welcome us in. And sometimes we don't have the same opinion. And I've always appreciated SAP's view that the customer opinion is important to them. It may take some time for them to hear it completely, but they are listening, right? Which is why I know that, I know every single member of SAP's executive board. And I know if we have a pressing customer issue, they will take my phone call. They know who I am by name, and we can talk it through. That, I think, is a huge reason why SAP is as good as it is. If you're an existing SAP customer, we are working in a new world. It's cloud, it's SaaS, it's low customization in order to get to innovation. So the faster you move along that curve, the better off you will be ultimately. And I recognize that's easier said than done. It's fun to say that behind a microphone, right, in a glass room. And I know that many of our customers have a million other business priorities. We're doing mergers and acquisitions. We haven't even finished. Some of them haven't even completely finished their ECC rollout. Not all their plants are live on ECC. Hey, I don't have one ERP. I have 5 of them, right? So many of them are dealing with all these different variables going around. So this isn't as easy as it seems. If this was so simple, we all would be there by now. But obviously it's not. There's a lot of competing factors. Let's work through them. If you need help, give me a call. Go to an ASUG chapter meeting. There's one in your backyard. Make sure you're at Sapphire Now and ASUG Annual Conference. You're at ASUG Tech Connect. Make sure you're being an active role. If you are an SAP practitioner, are you at the top of your game skill-wise? And that's why ASUG's here.
Yeah, that's great advice. And there's something to be said for sort of peer mentoring and hearing
100%.
it, sort of real stories from peers. That it's different than hearing it from you or I or another partner of SAP or whatever the case may be. Just hearing it from your peers, I imagine that there's a lot of power in that.
I believe one of the things that we are told over and over again by the membership, and I hear this all the time, is the customer story, customer to customer, is the most impactful. They all can figure out when a partner is in front of them pitching a product. They can figure that out pretty quickly, and they sort of turn off. When a customer gets in front of them and says, this was the journey I went on, here are the problems I encountered, here's how I solve them. I watch everyone's eyes get out of their iPhones or their Android devices, eyes go up, focus forward, listening. They are listening to those things. It is very powerful.
All right. Great conversation. Appreciate having Geoff on the show. And we're going to debrief on a couple of the more salient points that he covered in that conversation. First, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of the Journey to S/4HANA podcast.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello and welcome back to the Journey to S4HANA podcast, episode number 12. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find current and past episodes of the show by going to journey-to-s4hana.com. And Darian, we just had Geoff on the show, the president or CEO of ASUG. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, I think it was a great conversation. I think Geoff's advice on evaluating and addressing skill gaps within ERP teams was definitely super relevant today. I think it's really essential for organizations to invest in that continuous learning, like he was mentioning. So I thought that was a really good point that he made. He also emphasized the importance of early planning on transitions into S4HANA by 2027. What advice would you give to organizations that are currently in the process of planning or executing this migration?
Well, I'd say keep planning and making progress if you can, but I'd also say don't let SAP's 2027 deadline dictate how you run your business. I mean, if you've got other priorities, competing priorities, whatever it is, make whatever business decisions you need to make and know that, yes, there's a risk if you don't get off ECC or R3 or whatever system you're on. If you don't get off it by the time the product gets sunset and you no longer have support, there's other ways around it. You've got third-party maintenance options. You could even go without maintenance. It's not the end of the world to not have maintenance. It's not ideal, and I wouldn't recommend you do it for a long time. But if you're out there making a big acquisition or you've got a big capital project already underway, you have to expand your manufacturing facility or you're adding new warehouses and that's deploying a lot of your resources, then do what you need to do and get to SAP and the SAP upgrade when it makes sense for you, knowing that, yes, there's a risk that SAP may stop supporting you. I do question whether or not they'll actually stop supporting customers in 2027. I know when we had, I think it was Len Riley from Upper Edge was on the show. I think it was on episode number 4. Len was on the show and he was talking about the 2027 deadline. And in that interview, he said he did not think that SAP was going to change it. He was pretty adamant. He said, I really don't think they're going to change it again. I think they're sticking to 2027. I don't know that I agree with him on that. It's an interesting point. I admit I could be wrong. I have no factual information to base it on other than just the logic of SAP has some of the largest companies in the world, largest organizations in the world. They have a lot to lose by screwing up their S4HANA implementations, and they have a lot to lose by not having support from SAP. So it's hard for me to imagine that, you know, a big, massive organization like Coca-Cola or whoever, I don't even know if Coca-Cola uses SAP, but let's assume they do for a minute. I have trouble believing that SAP is going to tell a big, massive company like that, sorry, we're done supporting you. Figure it out on your own. You should have upgraded S4HANA by now. They're certainly going to try and get them to upgrade S4HANA, but I have trouble believing they're going to cut them off completely. So we'll have to see. I don't, that's, again, pure speculation, but I think they're going to extend the date, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know we also talked about the customization piece from a social comment earlier, but I know Geoff highlighted the need to minimize customization when you're adopting S/4HANA. Could you expand on the potential impact on reducing customizations on implementation timelines and the overall project success?
Yeah, it's a great question and a contentious topic because yes, he is correct that if you don't customize, you will probably implement technology a lot faster. Whether or not you implement technology a lot faster that works for your business and allows you to operate the way you need it to, that's a whole nother story. And that's what I question. I'm not saying that every company out there should be customizing more, but every company I've ever worked with, and when I say every, I literally mean every organization I've ever consulted to, has something that they need for competitive reasons or operational excellence reasons or whatever it is. They have something they need where the software they've chosen or the software they're using doesn't ideally address that need. And so then they're forced into a trade-off. They say, okay, well, customization is bad, so I'm just going to accept whatever the software can do. Okay, well, you're probably going to deploy that software faster, but now you're going to have more user resistance issues. You're going to have more operational issues. You're going to have more to work through as far as workarounds, or, do we bolt on another system to address that need? There's all these things now that you've introduced in terms of complexities, and it's too myopically simplified to say, well, just don't customize and you'll be successful. Well, I mean, I wish it was that easy. That'd be awesome. I mean, I think we'd see a lot less failures in the marketplace if that were true. But the problem is it's not true. It's going to make the technology work stream easier, but it's going to make your operational and your organizational work streams a lot more difficult, and potentially your integration and architecture work stream too. So all you're doing is really shifting the risk from one area to the other. You're not getting rid of the risk completely. So I do take a bit of issue or disagree with him a bit on that, but I see what he's saying. He's saying basically don't customize unless you really have to.
Yeah, I think the conversation overall was a really great conversation, and it touches on points that definitely are up for debate in a lot of different areas. So that was awesome.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. It was good to have him on the show, and we're going to have a lot more guests like him, a lot more telling or very informative guests here in the next few weeks. Actually coming up in episode number 15, which will be the season finale. Season 1 finale will be episode 15. That's going to premiere on June 23rd. And in that episode, we're going to have the Chief Innovation Officer, the Vice President of Innovation based out of Paris, France for SAP. And his name's Timo Elliott. So he'll have similar perspective to Geoff, although Geoff is not directly affiliated with SAP. We're going to have our first guest from SAP actually in that season finale, Timo Elliott, who's the head of innovation and AI for SAP. So that'll be really interesting too. So be sure to stick around for that. And then next week we'll have Jocelyn Hayes, who's an SAP consultant. She'll be talking about trends and lessons from SAP customers and their implementations. And then episode 14, in 2 weeks from today, we'll have Mike Stone on the show, who's going to provide a implementation case study from a customer perspective. He's a SAP customer that just recently went through an S4HANA implementation. So a lot more to cover in these last 3 episodes of season 1 of Journey to S4HANA. Appreciate you being here today. Thank you, Darian, and thank you to Geoff for being here today as well. Thank you to the audience for listening here today. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Journey to S4HANA podcast. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.